Hi everyone, it's Nicole here today for Honeybee Stamps with a Beehive scene card to share with you. This beehive is so super detailed and layered and really creates such cute cards and works perfectly with the Busy Bees stamp set. I have got this branch and leaves die set that I already pre-die cut all of the elements from some brown cardstock and 2 shades of green cardstock for the layered leaves. And then I've got 3 shades of yellow cardstock for the beehive. We're going to add a little extra dimension to the die cut pieces with some ink. We're going to start with some ground espresso distress ink and ink up the branch in certain places to darken it up just a little bit here and there and give it that two-tone great look. Then we're going to ink up our leaves, both the darker and lighter pieces, with Mode Lawn Distress ink. And we're going to ink up the beehive pieces with Wild Honey. Now all of these pieces are pretty small, and so what I found that works the best is to take a piece of Post-it tape. Washi tape would work as well, something kind of low tack. And then I laid the pieces out on the Post-it tape, and it's going to allow me to easily ink up the edges, so much easier than trying to just ink them individually. It was going to be kind of a hassle because we're basically building this little beehive with all of these little strips. And you can see that by using the Post-it tape, it just allows you to hold on so much easier. This worked so well that I did this for the leaves as well, and we'll use some Post-it tape to hold those in place. Now there are 5 different leaves in the branch and leaves die collection. I ended up having to die cut a few extra leaves to really just kind of round it all out. I think I die cut 3 extra and did 8 total. If the whole branch was being shown, you might want to go ahead and die cut even more leaves, just depending on how full you want your branch to be. You could add leaves anywhere. I just really added them at the end of the branches. Don't forget to add a little bit of ink to all the additional beehive pieces as well. A little ground espresso worked really great on the darker layers. I did not add additional ink from my ink pad to the blending tool. I used whatever ink was already on there so that it didn't get too terribly dark. Here I'm just inking up the bigger end of the leaves, the end that kind of is going to attach to the branch. And you can see how well that Post-it tape works to hold those down in place. So great. Let's go ahead and do that for the lighter leaf piece as well. I love the two-tone of the leaves. It adds a lot of texture, a lot of dimension, and really gives a fun look. All of these new dies from Honeybee Stamps are just super fun for scene building. I'm a huge fan of building scene cards, and these work great in so many different ways. Now let's build our background so we can start putting it all together and adding the bees and all of those fun finishing touches. I'm taking the Outdoor Scene Builder Clouds stencil, and on a A2 size piece of BRISTOL smooth cardstock, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, a standard A2 sized card, I'm going to start inking up my cloud stencil by simply spinning it around using all 4 sides to add that scallop border with Salty Ocean Distress ink. I like the BRISTOL smooth cardstock for this because it is a lot more forgiving than a traditional cardstock. But if you are really great at inking on just Neenah smooth cardstock or whatever cardstock you use, go for it. I just do not have that gift. I think I use a little bit too heavy of a hand. So BRISTOL smooth cardstock is so much more forgiving in this case. And there is my beautiful blue inked background. I love the cloud backgrounds. I use them all the time for so many different kinds of cards. So we are ready to start adhering, and I always like to start with my biggest element and work from the background up. In this case, we're going to need to start with our branch and build up to the leaves and then the beehive and finish with a sentiment and then the little bees and any other accents we're going to add to this card. I went ahead and used liquid glue for the branch. It is so nice and long, it's going to hang off, but I want to make sure I leave enough of my branch hanging there through the design that I have places to put all my leaves. And I am just going to, it hangs off a little up in that upright corner and then a little on the left side. Any of that can be trimmed off later. And then I'm going to layer some of the leaves here. I want to wait and add the rest of them kind of after I know exactly where I want my beehive to go, but most of the leaves I can go ahead and get in place. This is a great time to go ahead and grab those extra leaves or die cut those extra leaves if you need to. Give a really nice full branch. I think it would be fun to even add a few extras now that I look at it after I finished. I think it would have been fun to add even a few more. Now the beehive is nice and big, so for the first 2 layers I used a tape runner, and then I'm going to use the negative part of where I die cut the layers for the beehive as a guide, so I know where to put all of these little pieces. And I'm using some liquid adhesive for this. Probably could maybe get by with glue dots or something if you wanted to, but this tends to work pretty good. And I'm really excited about how great the Wild Honey Distress ink turned out on this. It looks really fun. Now this worked pretty well. I noticed a couple places it did not line up perfectly as I finished, and really quickly before that glue dried, because it was already starting to dry, I picked them up and shifted them over. It just didn't line up quite as well as I wanted it to. It seemed like such a good idea, but maybe I didn't have it lined up quite right. And then don't forget to add the ovals for the opening in the beehive. And our scene is really starting to come together. Isn't that so cute and fun? Now I have trimmed off some of those excess pieces. I'm flipping the panel over, trimming that off, and getting rid of anything that's overhanging. Now before I get into too much more of building the scene, we have kind of our opening for where the greeting is going to go. And the greeting is such an important part of the card. I want to make sure and get that in place before I add any of my bees or other embellishment. I know that I want to use some of the words and things from the Bee-You-Tiful Sentiments stamp set, as well as the Bee-You-Tiful Honey Cuts die. I'm using the stamp as a guide, but I'm going to replace that word bee with a dimensional die cut word for a little added interest and a little pop of color. But that stamp serves as a great placeholder while we're trying to figure out where everything goes. Now I really worked hard and took quite a lot of time trying to line up all these individual words. When you're working with sentiments that are kind of build a sentiment, and Honeybee has a lot of these, take your time and make sure you get everything right where you want it to go. The great thing about using a stamp positioner tool is that there is a grid on there that allows you to really make sure everything is lined up perfectly and is straight. And you will save yourself so much heartache if you use it that way. In fact, I just really wasn't super happy with the last 2 words of my greeting, and I kept working with it, and I left this in the video just to show you that it's perfectly okay to keep fussing with it so that you make sure and get it just the way you want. In fact, I knew that I could kind of cozy up those greetings a little bit more than they were when that stamp was in there, so I removed the bee stamp and then moved those phrases up. We're going to ink these up with a black ink and stamp them right on the card, and then I can die cut and ink my word bee and add that right into the greeting. So here is part of my sentiment. Such a fun little font here. I love this. I did die cut the word bee from a scrap piece of smooth wet cardstock that I have adhered to fun foam with stick it adhesive. This is one of my favorite things to do with a scripty style text die or greeting die, is to die cut it from the dimensional material. I love that little bit of dimension. I inked it up with Wild Honey Distress ink, kind of an ombre effect from light to dark. I'm using a piercing tool rather, to pop out any of those little areas in the letter B and the two E's. And then because it's so dainty and I've touched the adhesive quite a lot with my fingers and there's oil on our hands no matter how much we wash them, I was afraid it wouldn't stick very well because it is so fine. So I did put a little extra liquid adhesive on the back of it before I popped it in place on my card and put an acrylic block on there to hold it down flat while it dries. But that little pop of color adds so much fun to the sentiment. I have stamped 5 bees, 3 of the larger size bees and both of the smaller ones from the Busy Bees stamp set, and then 2 of the hearts, the medium and the small hearts from the stamp set. I'm coloring everything in with Copic markers, really fast coloring here. Couple of shades of warm gray and a couple of shades of yellow for the bees, some blue violets for the wings. We're going to cover the wings with Nuvo Crystal Drops in White Blizzard. But I love that little hint of purple to the wings. It gives it a little bit of an iridescent feel. And then some peachy pinks for the hearts. That's all. Very, very quick and easy coloring. I did not spend a ton of time on this. I just got the color on there, grabbed the coordinating dies, taped them in place with Post-it tape, and then ran them through my die cutting machine. We're going to tape everything in place, pop everything out. I like to keep my magnetic sheet with dies that any dies that have this many little moving parts and pieces, I keep a magnetic sheet and I'm just going ahead and putting them back as I remove them so that I don't lose any. And then I'm going to use a combination of foam adhesive squares and glue dots to attach my bees to my card. The larger bees are going to have some glue dots. I like that little bit of dimension for them. The smaller ones I'm going to attach directly to the card itself. Plan out where all these little guys are going to go before I get too much going on there. And I need to figure out where to put my hearts. I thought it would be fun to put the bigger heart in the center of the opening of the beehive and then the smaller one underneath the sentiment. Nice little pops of color. Once we get our bees where they're going to go, it's really time to start adding the finishing touches. And one of my favorite things about the Busy Bees stamp set is that there is these little bee trails. And I think that'll be a really fun touch. What I like to do is lay them out, kind of make sure everything's going to work the way I think they're going to work, make sure it looks natural before I commit to stamping these. You could use a stamp positioner tool and maybe stamp them all at once, but where I have a lot of dimension going on, there's a lot of layering with the die cuts, there's some foam adhesive behind the bees, I was a little worried that maybe they wouldn't stamp correctly because I hadn't already added those. So I'm going to use a traditional acrylic block and some VersaFine Onyx black ink. I did stamp them off on a scrap piece of paper first just to make sure I was going to get a good stamped impression. Another thing with these, they tend to be a little bit delicate. Don't push too hard when you stamp them because it tends to make the little dots smush out, and that's definitely not the look we're going for. So stamp it on a scrap piece of paper and then just kind of gently with even pressure stamp that onto your project. Stamping it on a scrap piece of paper first really helps kind of ensure that you know how much pressure to use when stamping these. So we've got this one and then one more over here on the left side. I really felt this little guy needed a little bit too. And the scene is really coming together. So much fun. I did get a little black ink smudge there along the bottom edge of my card. I must have had black ink on my finger and I used a Tombow eraser to kind of get rid of that. Now it's time to embellish. We've got some Nuvo Crystal Drops in White Blizzard. This is that awesome iridescent that I'm placing over the wings that is going to give them a sparkly, shimmer, iridescent looking look when it completely dries. I'm also adding this to the hearts. I thought that would be a fun touch as well. Some white dots with an opaque white pin on the cheeks of the larger bees. Also some little white highlights to the die cut pieces. So I started with my leaves and I'm just going to work my way around the entire design. We've got the leaves, we're going to add it to each layer of the beehive. Fun little highlights, really just takes the design up a notch, adds a really fun little element and embellishes these die cuts perfectly. And I needed to fix or add a little additional liquid adhesive here to one of the leaves. It was kind of popping up a little bit. I also want to add some white highlights to the branch, just kind of here and there. It ties it into the rest of the die cut pieces that have some highlight. Now I lost my black glaze pen and I can't find it anywhere. I have one on order. So what I've been using, and you have to be really careful, is the Ebony Black Nuvo Crystal Drops. And it adds really great accents to the eyes. They're even a little dimensional, so it's really fun, but you want to use just a teeny tiny little amount. I'm going to finish the design with a scattering of Nuvo Crystal Drops in Dandelion Yellow and Gloss White. Scatter those throughout. Really finishes off the design, adds a really fun little touch. I always love Nuvo Crystal Drops. Then we're going to take this whole panel, pop it onto a white side fold card base. I like to put my adhesive on the card base itself. And that will finish up this Hive Scene Card featuring honeybee stamps and dies. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this Busy Bee Beehive card. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.